Hey guys, welcome back. And today we're going to be talking about how it is that compassion is the key to integrated awareness or changing behavior. First, I think it's really important that we start by having compassion for the lack of compassion that we see in our world today. We can see a lack of compassion as a coping mechanism, right? We would never look at a dog that has been abused who bites somebody as a bad dog, and we're like, oh, that makes sense. That dog's been beaten. Of course it's going to bite people. So that's what we're looking at with human beings when we have the abused abusing and victims victimizing other people. So I'm going to demonstrate in this video how it is that compassion is both spontaneous and a skill that we have to cultivate. So I'm proposing to you that compassion is basically the medicine that expedites the process of awareness, and this is happening through the vehicle that is connection and safety, which is leading to awareness. And what does awareness lead to? It leads to a change in behavior if it's an integrated awareness, if that awareness comes from a space of connection. So essentially, compassion leads to connection, leads to safety, leads to awareness, leads to behavioral change. Of course, the level that we're able to access compassion varies greatly, and it depends on how compassionate people were with us, which then is going to be mirrored in how compassionate we are with parts of ourselves, which then is mirrored in how compassionate we are with the world around us, and then that mirrors how compassionate the world is with us. And so it's just a giant hall of mirrors. And of course, we can have compassion for something that we haven't personally experienced, but we can tap into that perspective. We can tap into that perspective based on either something we've experienced that's similar, or we can disidentify with our perspective and completely go into that perspective. Remember what I was saying, how it's going to vary greatly from person to person, our ability to cultivate compassion. Maybe you're somebody that it's really easy for and it's hard for you to imagine what somebody without compassion would look like, but it's definitely existing on a scale. So something that's interesting to know, which I've talked about before, is that this is a mirror-based reality, right? So all of our internal selves are going to be reflected externally, which means that the level of rejection or disconnection we have or identification we have with a part of ourselves, that's going to be mirrored externally. So that's why it's really easy to have compassion for certain situations, because chances are that's an aspect of self that we're identified with. Maybe it's the underdog or the victim or fill in the blank. It might be easy for you to have compassion for a foster child, but how easy is it for you to have compassion for something that might be considered bad or wrong? Something that maybe is a little bit more unsavory, like a rapist or a pedophile or spiders, or things that maybe you have a reactionary response to based on your own rejection of that thing or socialization. How is it that we can start to move into compassion for those things? Because it's easy to have compassion for, a starving child, duh. But is it so easy to have compassion for the part of you that is a drug addict? Is it so easy to have compassion for the part of you that makes mistakes, or the part of you that's unkind? Is it easy to have compassion for the spider right before you step on it? Is it easy to have compassion for the person who is stepping on the spider? See, this is a never-ending hole. Something else that I'm sure you've already realized in your life is that when other people are nice to you and you've made a mistake, or maybe there's something that you don't know, how much more willing are you to actually open up to seeing that other perspective? You're a lot more willing, because if people are nice to us, then we're like, okay, maybe I can see your perspective. But when people put us in a state of defense, or the energy is attacking or antagonistic in any way, or feels non-compassionate or non-understanding, our being closes down into defense mode. So how likely are we to really jump into that perspective? Maybe we do later, but definitely not in front of that person. So if we're really after expediting awareness with ourselves and with other people, we have to realize that compassion definitely is the road to that, because that softness is what allows people's beings to open up in the first place. Okay, so compassion, great, I understand it intellectually, it all makes sense. But something I really want to draw our attention to is, how is it that we're doing this in a micro kind of way? It's easy to see the big pushaways that we're doing. For example, the guy that was standing in line in front of me the other day, there's a big sign that says, no longer serving plastic straws, please ask if you would like a straw. And the guy literally asked for 3 straws. He was like, yeah, can I have 3 straws? And I think my eyes rolled so far back in my head that I could not visually see. So I was like, and then I may or may not have said something, and I was like, really? Wow, 3? It's a little greedy. But the point is that was me having non-compassion for a person who was in a state of non-compassion. And you can see how this is a fucking cycle. So at some point, somebody has to step out and say, oh wait, I gotta have compassion for the non-compassion or for the disconnection. Otherwise, I am literally just repeating the very wound that created the disconnection in the first place. Because how is it that somebody can become so disconnected that I can live in my ivory tower of a house and put my trash out, put my plastic containers out, and not actually have to see the results of that? Like, how does that get created in the first place? It gets created from a level of disconnection. So I don't treat that with more disconnection. No, I give it the medicine of what the missing experience is, which is compassion. So now you're like, where's the story? I've been waiting for the story this whole time. You're just giving me a lot of shit. The first story I'm going to tell you is about somebody that I talked to about 2 days ago. Okay, so sitting next to this guy and just like started chatting, and I was asking him, what were you doing earlier today? And he said, I was fishing. And I was like, oh, that's interesting. Well, did you catch anything? Now, even though I'm a vegan, like I can still have a conversation with somebody about fishing. I'm like, okay, whatever, you do you. He said, oh no, I just caught them and, sent them back. I didn't catch anything worth taking home. And I had to stop for a second because I don't really know much about like fishing culture, and it's been a minute since I've like thought about any of this stuff. I was like, wait, people do that? They just throw them back? And so I kind of like just authentically responded like that. And he said, well, yeah, I mean, we use the kind of hook where it doesn't hurt them. It's like a different, doesn't have the prongs or some kind of a special hook. And I was like, oh yeah, no, I get, the special hook, the one that doesn't hurt you. That one. I didn't know about that one. What? In my mind, I'm like, okay, huh? So I said, okay, just follow this logic for a minute with me. If I put this hook in your mouth versus this hook, are you really going to be able to tell the difference? And he was like, I had to take a minute to think about that. And I was like, I can understand fishing and going and eating that fish, but to just have the privilege to like disrupt a system for the hell of it, for fun, for sport, literally for sport, with no connection to that thing, it's a little interesting, don't you think? And so I think because my energy in that moment wasn't, oh my God, you're disgusting, how could you do that? It was like curious and just stating the facts, which I think is really important when we're dealing with a disconnection in what seems like obvious logic. And this person actually changed their behavior because of that and was like, I don't think this is something that I'm going to do anymore. This is something I really need to think about. And so sometimes we just assume that something is so obvious, but people are living in totally different realities, and it just goes to show the level of disconnection that's really happening. Not to like harp on the disconnection train, but for real, if we can tell ourselves that story, that this hook is not painful, like what does that say about us as humans? That story basically shows you that compassion can be used as a tool to create awareness. Because in that moment, what happened was I created connection with that person, which created a container of safety, which awareness was able to unfold within. So we see compassion, connection, safety, awareness. This is like this pattern that takes place. And this alchemy creates awareness and a dissolving of inauthenticity. The next story that I'm going to share with you exemplifies the spontaneity of compassion and how awareness can unfold within that spontaneity. This next story is a little bit more complicated, but it happened about 2 months ago when I was in Utah. We were on our way to Salt Lake. I was helping to volunteer, facilitating some of the things with training the next group of completion process practitioners. And I was in a van with 7 other people, and I had been told, by the way, one of the people in this van was a cult abuse survivor who had been through some really traumatic shit. For those of you that don't know, Teal, who's the person who created the completion process, has also been through cult abuse and is a cult abuse survivor. A lot of this stuff actually came out of the awareness that was gained through that time. But anyways, so somebody had told me something about this person that was the cult survivor, which was that they were actually still in the cult and that they had been sent here to extract information from this particular group. Now, intuitively, first of all, I knew that Teal was extrasensory enough to know if something like that was going on. She would have never allowed this person to be there. So intuitively, I knew that that didn't feel right. But I let this thing like poison my mind, and it had been poisoning my mind for like a whole day, and it was building up this whole fear response towards this person. So I'm in the car with them and I'm like, imagine that somebody basically told you, hey, this person is not really like a person in a way, like they've been programmed and they're actually programmed here to extract information. Like that sounds like somebody's telling you that somebody is the devil, and then you're like trying not to look at them like they're the devil. So I'm in the car and I'm like looking at her and I'm just scanning her eyes, like I've got to fucking find out. I've got to know. I got to fucking find out what is true. And she can sense that, and I know that she can sense that, but we don't really talk about it. Then there's somebody else in the car that says something about a specific situation with Teal, which I will not go into because it's not my story to tell, where basically she realized that her abuser was also programmed and that he himself was suffering. And it was a moment of like, oh my God, how far back does this go? How many people are programmed that are doing the abuse themselves? And there was a moment of seeing the vulnerability of her abuser. And it was in hearing that story that that person next to me said that I started to like process this information, and process at a really, really deep cellular level. That as human beings, we can demonize people all we want, but those people are victims themselves. And to see the pain in causing another person so much pain in this cycle that we're caught in because of disconnection, and it all just caught up with me, and I completely lost it and just started sobbing, and the altitude sickness was getting to me, and we were in this car, and I felt like I was having a fucking ayahuasca ceremony, like a journey. From the people watching me in that car, it looked like thought I was going to throw up. I was like shaking. My blood sugar was dropping because my body could not contain the energy that was pouring through me. I was really channeling this perspective, really, really compassionately, empathically understanding at a cellular level this perspective. What happened was interesting because the longer that I stared at her, the more that I was actually able to see through to the core or the authenticity. I was searching, I was trying to figure out if what I knew to fear was actually true, or if there was really a thread in there. And for those of you that don't understand programming, like you really have to understand what I'm saying, because those programs take over a person's mind, and you're talking to programs. Like if you program somebody from the time that they're a baby, you can program their favorite color into them. Like everything about them is not really them, which is why it can be a little bit scary. So anyways, I started to fucking see visually, because that's how I see information. That's how I get intuitive information, is visually. So I started getting these blocks of information, and I just saw all these programs that like spread out around her. And I saw one for invisibility. I saw one for being weird or strange, not making sense. Like I saw the way that this whole situation had not only been crafted, because programmers work with the way that the psyche is functioning. They're not going to work against the psyche. So I saw how I was already programmed, because of the way the society functions, to see her as a person, which is why there's a lot of people that come out of this kind of stuff who end up homeless or in mental institutions, and we just think they're fucking crazy and we don't actually see what's going on with them. So I'm like telling her about these programs as I'm seeing them. I'm like, I can fucking see this, and I can see how I'm meant to distrust you, and there's all these things that are set up so that I don't fucking see the truth of you. And it's scary. It was scary. It was like my being wanted to fight seeing her and the truth that she was actually like good, or I don't even know how to explain it, was fighting it so bad. And collectively, I was embodying this struggle that we have to really seeing that these are real issues that are going on. The level of disconnection, you guys, like, why do you think that your life looks the way that it does? Why are you suffering in the way that you are in your relationships and with addictions, with all these things? It's because of disconnection. So like, it was all fucking coming together at that moment. And I saw these programs and I was telling her about them, and she slowly worked her way close to me. And I'm telling you, I was still not convinced. It took, I broke through though. There was like a wormhole that happened that I was able to drop through, and my entire being relaxed, and I was like, okay, I can trust this. I don't know how, I don't know why. I had no information that told me I should trust this, but I can trust it, and I can trust you. And then when I got out of the car, my body started shaking because I was like just trying to process all this trauma. That's what your body does. And I know that actually. So a whole other awareness came out of this. By the way, my level of being able to see her, for those of you that don't understand this, like in her case, she intellectually understands what happened to her, but she is not emotionally, physically processed through all of that. How you cannot, like, there's so much there. And so, especially if you're not being seen, if you have no mirror and you're coming out of this, like just to even hear somebody say, dude, I see you. Wow. When you yourself haven't even really been able to come to terms or grips with that because you don't even have other people there saying, I fucking see this. Like, to be able to have that experience cracked something in her, cracked that emotional body a little bit, where I was able to like mirror the levity and the implications of this situation. That was huge. So I get out of the van and I'm sitting with her, with this woman, and I'm like shaking, and I know, and we're supposed to be there meeting like 30 other people, by the way. So there's a part of me that was like, don't shake because there's other people. They're going to be around. Turns out they were already on their way. So it all happened in divine timing and all that shit. And then all of a sudden, as I was like resisting it, my body came up as another being and started fucking talking to me. For those of you who have experimented or been privy to experiencing plant medicines, you know what I mean when you say another entity starts talking to you. For those of you that do parts work, you also know what I'm talking about. This part, basically my body, which I did not realize I was that disconnected from, was like, hey, holla at your boy. I have been here this whole time. And I don't know if you know, but whether you've been emotionally checked out or not, I've actually been here, ride or die. And I'm like, oh shit, yeah, you're right, you do actually know what's up. So in that moment, that's a super simplified version of what happened, by the way, but in that moment, I created a relationship with my body in a way that I had never created before. The other thing that happened that was absolutely fucking insane, which was that I had this really visceral integration of self and other. It was like, because I was channeling this really profound thing, I was really dissociated from my body. I had this woman that was helping me to actually energetically ground in my body. And as I was zooming out, I could see the value in every single person in that vehicle. Like the observers, the people that couldn't hear what was going on, the people that had played, like everything. And it just made so much sense in that moment that every single perspective is so unique and so valuable, and no more valuable than the other. Whether you're in your singular perspective and grounding into your body, or you're expanding out and you're able to see how everyone has this equal amount of value, and it's equal, like the exact same amount of equal value. So many things came out of that experience. It was like a fucking shamanic journey. I felt like I had aged 3 years by the time that whole thing was done. And then the relationship with my body. So that is what I'm talking about. Spontaneous. Totally spontaneous. It was like one story and it was like bing, 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 bing. All this shit started happening. And awareness fucking prevailed. Okay, so what is really epic about all of this is that this fits into the framework of everything else that I've been talking about and everything else that I've learned. Not just about the emotional body, but about the physical body, is that if we retrace the steps of trauma, when I'm doing this is like, if you're in an auto accident and you're thrown this way, what is a physical therapist going to do with you? That any good physical therapist is going to retrain and re-strengthen your arm along every range of motion that the wound happened in. That's exactly what we're doing emotionally. We are retracing and giving the opposite experience. If you had a total lack of control of motion, what are we going to do? The healing experience is going to be having a controlled motion. If you have disconnection and a lack of compassion, your medicine is going to be compassion. Why do people have a lack of compassion? Because they have a lack of awareness. So what creates awareness? Compassion. And what's even beyond that is that what creates behavioral change? Awareness. Whether you, we can become aware of something and then totally subconsciously push it away. But once you see something, you also can't unsee it. So even if your behavior doesn't change overnight, there will be a behavioral change. And chances are, if your awareness comes on the heels of compassion, you're probably actually going to have a behavioral change. Because if you're shamed into awareness, how likely are you to make a behavioral change? Or are you just going to go right back in the direction of the negative coping mechanisms because the shame is pushing you right back into that same initial wounded feeling state? So because of these two stories, I now include people who fish for sport, my body, cult victim survivors, and I think that's it, as part of my reality now, which means I can now have way more compassion for those people, beings, and things. And I have thus taken action that has changed and been different because I'm making this video and I'm talking to you about this right now. And I've made different choices with my body and I've made the same choices with my body. But the awareness is still there and it's a journey. And I now can understand what would create the kind of circumstances that would cause somebody to fish for sport. Disconnection. We don't need more of that. We don't need to shame people for it. We just need to do the opposite. Which means giving ourselves that experience first. Because otherwise, why are we reacting the way that we are to our external world? Because that's the internal world that we have. Compassion is this fire that burns away inauthenticity and allows for true intimacy to take place. And this true intimacy is the birthplace of awareness and of consciousness. Eee! You guys want to know about this? This is the Teal Swan. This is how you know I'm culted up. Because they'd be like, oh, she has the same tattoo as Teal Swan. She must be a cult member. And I'm like, yeah, I am. That's right. I'm an alchemist. I'm an alchemist. What it represents, you didn't ask, but I'm going to tell you anyways. It looks weird when I do it like that. It's like a long oval. It's supposed to be a circle. It represents void, is the inner circle. Activated by thought creates physical manifestation surrounded by oneness. It's the formula for physical life. So nothingness activated by thought. The thought, what am I? Blah, blah, blah. Physical manifestation surrounded by oneness. Compassion. I feel so compassionate for you, baby. Okay, well, can we just do one normal, exit strategy? One normal exit strategy. Thank you guys for watching, and I will see you next time. Thank you guys for watching. I'll see you next time. Meow. Grandma shark doo 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 doo. Grandma shark. Grandpa shark doo 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 doo. Shark doo 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 doo. Baby shark doo 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 doo. Baby. How many of you guys used to watch Ooby, or was that just me watching cartoons in the 8th grade while everybody else was busy growing up? Baby shark doo 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 doo. Baby shark doo 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 doo.